And we are live.
Let it be, so shall it be. Good luck to you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I have to just apologize to our viewers, people who, waited with great anticipation, logged on by 1 o'clock. You know what, when it comes to technology, I have learned that it's okay. You do what you can. There's nothing more that you can do beyond what you can. So it's okay. We're getting feedback from you, like a bit of a delay, but like I said, it's fine. We're gonna just push, we'll carry on. We have 45 minutes left now because 15 minutes was pretty much wasted, but let's get right into it. My name is Jabulile Buthelezi, and I am the convener of Millennial Dialogue on Africa. I'm very passionate about millennials. This group of people are leaders, not emerging leaders, are leaders who are pretty much taking up space as we speak. And believe you me, today's interview is something we call by popular demand. So I have been really trying and pushing to get this man on board because the millennials have been bugging me to get this man on board so we can quickly just throw a few questions at him. He's a busy man, Maponga Marara Joshua. I call him Maponga J. So, if I can, allow me to not recognize your English name. I'd rather stick with Marara Maponga J. Welcome to our show. Welcome to our space.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Kalonji. Nice to have you on the line.
So, look, I'm not going to waste time. I know a lot of people are waiting for this and we're going to get right into it. But I want to just give a small synopsis of what this is about. So the intention and the goal of this talk or this conversation is to answer questions more than anything, but in a way that, gives us some comfort and understanding in terms of, one, educating millennials about Africa and not necessarily educating them per se, but helping them uncover some of the truths and myths about Africa and Africa-related stuff. These are things that they question all the time. They pick it up from books, lots of literature that they read because they read quite wildly. They also pick it up from some of the stuff that you share on your social media, very boldly, some controversial, some making you want to really, sort of push the rug off and just try to redefine everything else. So that's why we're having this talk, to say, let everybody just get a piece of what they can understand. And I'll start off with this one. People are so convinced that Africa is a failed continent. In your view, who failed Africa?
Well, there's a proverb in Africa that says, when your enemy wants to burn his house, please give him the matchstick. So you would find that our failure, it is multi-dimensional. Firstly, we need to look at the bully attitude of colonialism and its insensitivity to the natural habitat of the African people and the entire colonial obsession with material at the expense of vegetation and at the expense of human life. That greed finds itself educated into the educational system of our people. The lifestyle is well marketed. Education becomes a tourism where when you go to school, you are getting a passport to escape from your culture, to escape from your poor background, to escape from your roots, so that you can assume the dominant culture, which is a colonial culture. So basically all the educated people, the more educated you are, the wider the gap between yourselves and the uneducated. It is a pity when the uneducated are your parents. Then you have a lot of information which is coming from the enemy side and a huge gap of information which is coming from your parental side. So you find that the millennial child is actually very educated, but they are missing an integral part of joining their critical history and background to marry it with the knowledge that they have so that they can collect a bit of their roots, stand it on their stems so they can have a good fruit in terms of results. So that's number one. Number two, the colonial system is a qualified economic system that is able to buy knowledge, buy material, buy politics, buy legislation, buy people, buy culture, buy entertainment, buy anything else. And it has become a prostitution of knowledge, which is available to the highest bidder. So unfortunately, African culture has not been able to place enough resources on its
so
own people. I'm listening.
No, it's fine. You can go ahead. I'll link the next question.
So we have an external force that is actually coming with a price tag on an auction of knowledge and an auction of culture. And the African person, the African traditional leader, the African cultural man.
Now I want to get to that.
When he's given the right sum of money, and it is going to prosper him and his family, you will find that many of our politicians have actually lost their dignity and morality in the name of buying a Western world. You find the French temple catches fire, and one of our own African leaders can contribute 20 million to repair a French temple, but he cannot contribute 1 million to find a solution for Corona. So you find that there is a participation from the external world in terms of buying the African conscience, with cooperation, of course, from our own African leaders who have put the African continent on auction. At all levels.
On auction.
At all levels.
And I need us to really decipher this. And I mean, this is not a fallacy, it's a truth and it's a fact we all know, we all see it, that Africa has been really downplayed, mostly at the forefront by the leaders. I mean, many people argue that, but I want to perhaps get you to help us understand what is it that you think is the actual issue. Is it the leaders who are problematic in Africa, or is it the institutions that our leaders found in Africa when they started leading, or is it a system that already exists that perhaps they just need to maintain? What is the actual problem in your view?
I'll use a very blunt knife so that the pain is excruciating. When you have a beautiful cell phone and the software that is on the cell phone is an old cell phone, or it's a faulty cell phone, it's faulty software, it is very impossible that your apparatus can function correctly. My favorite statement that I'm saying these days, both on morality of the African as individuals and as a state, is when a face is beautiful and the software is not working, hardware suffers. That is at a national level when I'm saying that. When the resources of the continent are plenty and they are beautiful and they are lovable, our diamonds, our gold, our uranium and our platinum, don't mention our weather and our farms and our land, our water and our trees. But the software of our administrators, the software of our leaders is not working. You'd find that the hardware, which hangs between our legs and between our ground, tends to suffer the most. Having said that, we need to be candid, be clear that the software of the African leader is a wrong software, because he comes onto the system not to change it, but maintain it for the colonial masters. Hence, colonialism has instituted a legal framework, instituted a legislative framework. So putting political leaders is putting monkeys and Popeyes to run and drive a car, which they don't even know how it was manufactured. For that reason, our leaders are not leading us on the basis of their knowledge, but on the basis of the supervision from the external market and the international community, who have vested business interest and political interest, as these interests are directly linked to their economic interest on the African continent. So our leaders are not our leaders. They are graduates of the West who have been put in as Uncle Toms to manage the black anger. And thank the Lord, religion is a very good instrument that manages the temper and the anger of the African, so that he cannot retaliate against the system as he is waiting for the clouds to open and you disappear to a kingdom that is hanging in the heavens, when the white people are enjoying the economy and the benefits that are on the ground.
I want to talk to you about that a bit later on. Very, very sensitive sort of sentiments around that in terms of religion and how it exists perhaps as a catalyst to maintain, as you put it, the anger of, Black people, or even Africans, so they don't get to revolt into perhaps this truth that they keep uncovering about themselves. But I just want you to hold on to that for now. And I need you to answer a question that a young millennial asked me, about, but what makes an African an African? So as an African person, what would you say makes an African an African? What makes an African an African?
I'll give you a biological answer, which is the most exciting. What makes the African is melanin, to start with. So I don't even want to start talking about the cosmetics of being an African, which are fashion driven, which are music driven, which are geographically driven. I think the first platform we need to start agreeing is that to be African is melanin, so that we are addressing the African both on the ground and in diaspora. We need, first of all, to recognize that being African has nothing to do with the cosmetics which have been defined to us by the colonial system. The first African I know is Bantu, Ubuntu, with melanin. We must recognize, however, that inside melanin, many coconuts have been produced, which remain brown on the outside, but white on the inside. But that must be acknowledged, that it is the quality of the software that has been forcefully put from kindergarten, from Tinky Winky, from Casper and the Friendly Ghost, from Beauty and the Beast, and entertainment and education and fashion and all forms of European beauty that seem to erode and eat away the essence of the expression of melanin, the expression of melanin. It is not even healthy for an African to put on as many clothes as we do, as our skins are the only ones which can kiss the sun and it remains with no problems at all.
Yeah. So would you say, I don't know if it's a fair question, it might sound a bit divisive, but I will ask it because, you know, I'm going to ask what people say. And people would often talk about things like who deserves to be in Africa, who belongs here and who doesn't belong here. And we've heard people talk about how people must go back to where they come from, Australia, blah, blah, blah. But we've also had instances amongst Africans themselves about people, certain people not belonging elsewhere. I will go to xenophobia slightly later, but who would you say belongs in Africa and who doesn't belong?
Firstly, the question of belonging in Africa, I'll answer that question in the question. You can spend 200 years in Europe, you will never be called a European. Full stop. And if for that reason, a black man who has 3, 4, 5 generations in Europe can never be called a European, why does a European come to Africa and after one passport stamp, he wants to be called an African because he's living in Bryanston and he's living in Mooikloof? So I don't have an answer for that because it is quite selective. Where there are benefits, you want to belong. Where the African must have advantage, you constantly marginalize him.
I hear you. So in terms of colonialism, do you think we can ever erase the damage it's done?
Colonialism for me cannot be understood until we collect together a group of women or a group of boys who have gone through a rape trauma. A rape trauma. And can I ask you a question? Will that ever be erased on the conscience, on the flesh, on the personality, on the psychology, on the economics, on the decisions, on the entire being of the person that has been molested and abused? Worse still, when the person who has abused you wants to help you to wash your body. Worse still, when the person who has abused you wants to tell you how to love him better. Worse still, when he's asking you how to live with him in your house. Then you know that the abuse is deep. When the abused is now trying to become more lovable to the abuser, and he is now buying him clothes, he's now washing his feet, bringing him more coffee and more water. Guess what? Because he or she feels that maybe if she becomes more loving and she becomes more kind, maybe it was his fault that he or she was abused. At the end of the day, you are dealing with the psychological trauma at the highest level. And for us as Black people to brainwash ourselves and whitewash colonialism as if it is a temporal feature that is superficial. You only need to visit the Black Americans who have gone through the trauma 400 years later, and you look through their eyes and you listen to their story, You listen to the tattoos that are on their body and the chains that are hanging on their necks. You listen to the language and the music they are using. You can tell that the damage cannot be superficial. For me, from the psychological point of view and the pastoral counseling point of view, the damage can never be fully repaired. But allow the abused to be around their own people. Allow them to grieve the way they want to grieve. Allow them to clean up their wounds, and allow them one morning, if they feel like they want to chop off your leg, so that their consciences and their hearts can repair. It is none of your business. You did what you wanted when you wanted to do it. It gratified you to the extent that it gratified you. You cannot stand up in front of me as a colonizer and tell me how to retaliate, and tell me how to revenge, and tell me that there is a constitution that tells me what I can do and what I cannot do. Because if you knew better of how the constitution works, how did you do what you did? If you knew better what human rights are all about, how come you did less than what you knew human rights are all about? Now it comes around that the one who has been injured wants to stand up and express himself. Then that's where you begin to talk about legislation. The biggest monster that is in the house is our legal framework that is now telling the African how best he can manage himself. There's a beautiful line that you always hear with politicians using: the rule of law. The rule of law. Wow. If you took the land without rule of law, why do you want to use the rule of law to return it back? If you took the African slaves without passports, why do you want to give us passports to return them back to mainland? That which was done without the law must be dealt with without the law. That which was done without immigration must be dealt with without immigration. There is no way you can turn around in the 21st century and you want to apply the rule of law when you, the colonialist, failed to apply the rule of law when you were busy abusing and harassing the natives.
So in your view, in terms of land, your position in terms of land, and you've shared this wildly, quite confidently many times, in terms of land, based on what you're saying, you believe that, Black people must get their land, and that they mustn't be frustrated with legislations and the rule of law in terms of how this process should be, because it wasn't taken in that premise of, the law. It was essentially stolen, as people would write it. So is that your view on land?
So I married you a few months ago, so allow me to make this personal. Then it will have the impact that I want it to have. Without isolating you, allow me to put you on the spot. I married you. And the day I came to marry you, I did not write a timetable of how many times your husband must sleep with you per day, per week, or per month. It is none of my business. And land for us is as good as our wives. Don't tell me that you cannot give a Black man land because he cannot sleep with the land. He cannot fertilize the land. Every man has their own land. I lived in Europe. You cannot access land as a foreigner. You can buy a house. The land belongs to the queen. When they come in Africa, they want the land. They want what is underneath the land. They want what is above the land. They want what is around the land. What they cannot do in their own country, when they come to Africa, they want the whole piece of cake. It is illegal in the animal world for any animal to procreate without establishing its own circumference, without establishing its own territory. A Black man who does not have land does not have a right to procreation and reproduction. Land to us is not a luxury. It is the birthright which we have, through which we can feed ourselves and leave an inheritance for our own children.
I want to make an example about what's happening now in the US with the African Americans. Of course, our brothers and sisters, they're having some challenges with Blackness and really, systematic racism that refuses to solve itself or disappear in the US. I mean, it's historical and we know. But there's an interesting view that I saw, perhaps even a video, I think a few days ago, where a massive number of African Americans in the US were rallying with each other, standing together to fight one common cause. Now, I don't want to talk about violent elements in the protests. That's a topic for another day, and I don't want them to take away from the actual values of what's currently happening in the US now. My question to you is, when you look at how African Americans are able to galvanize each other very, very strongly and support each other, and then you flip the coin to Africans, all of us in all our various parts of the continent, we profusely fail to rally behind each other on one common cause. You look at the idea of Madagascar a few weeks ago, that came up with something. It may not have been a solution, absolutely, but it perhaps was something worth entertaining, especially from the counterparts within the continent, to see how far it can go, maybe. And they were pretty much blue-ticked. They were ignored. Madagascar was blue-ticked by its very own. Why is it that we struggle to rally around each other? Why can't Africans sibumbane, as they would say it in Zulu, and really push towards one direction together? What is the problem?
One problem that we have is that we have not understood how the colonial system is built. We have been marching from the 1950s. We have been writing memorandums and submitting memorandums to government and powers that be. The very unfortunate part is that while we are writing and reading speeches, they are not reading speeches. They are shooting and they are killing. While we are standing on market squares and standing on city council buildings to submit a piece of paper, we say no. Africans say no to violence. We say no. Then they subsides again. A few days later, someone dies. We say no. We say no. The language of colonialism does not understand paperwork because it has never been built on negotiations, but forceful, intelligently managed government institutions systematically planned to marginalize the Black people. Listen to me very carefully. The colonial system is built on 4 pillars. Pillar number 1 is the business pillar. Get all the business into place. And as I'm saying how colonialism is built, I want you to cascade on the right how the Black people can begin to build also on the right. So colonialism is built on business. Yes. You have financiers who never go voting. You have never heard of Oppenheimer going voting. You have never heard of Rupert going voting. They have nothing to do with voting. It is a playfield of the poor people. Their money, they place it on their votes and they buy the people they want to get into power. And that is how they vote. So business buys politics. Please underline that. Business buys politics. When politicians are in power, politicians appoint legislature. Legislature, that's where constitutions and legal frameworks are. But they are controlled by the politicians who have been bought by the business people for the protection of their business. On the top side, that's where me and you belong. Then you can manage the media in terms of propaganda, what you want to tell the people. The marching of the Black people together, Black people can march together. Hallelujah for that. But Black people cannot put $1 per person and put it into a bank and create for themselves an economic structure that can run parallel to the colonial system, so that when we negotiate our deals, we can withdraw our resources from colonial shops. We can withdraw our resources from colonial projects and products. We can withdraw our services from colonial employers and employees, and we move ourselves into a space where the Black muscle, Black resources, Black energy, Black intelligence, Black unity can be converted into a subculture, self-driven and self-independent. And if the Black people could support each other, we will be the biggest and the largest market that has ever been found on the face of the continent. We'll never have to borrow money from anybody. They will come and borrow money from us. The European and colonial system benefits from the colonized supporting the colonial system.
Yeah. So I heard a very interesting quote by one of the leaders. I think it was the president of Ghana in a tape that was recorded just some years ago when he was engaging the president of France. And he was talking about how it is not correct for Africa or African leaders to continue to seek this financial aid from the West, when we know very well that the terms and conditions of these financial aids and these contracts by their very nature, are not meant or designed to, in the long run, uplift African development, African societies. Essentially, it's a win-lose situation. So it's never been a win-win, which is why we're having this conversation right now, because Africa is in a mess, because we're always at the receiving end of what the US or the other side puts forth to us as proposed solutions. I mean, why? So you've mentioned why we cannot rally together, but my issue is around the mindset. We know that the colonialists have left a very unfortunate legacy in our memory, but why are we not confident with who we are as people? Why are we so shy?
On the some note, we need to be very clear that passing out beautiful speeches during OAU, passing out intelligent speeches during United Nations is not practical. The same president who was busy lambasting the French president, the question is, where is his support on Madagascar right now? Right now, while we have the African Union in its place, 17 active wars are taking place on the continent. When we have an organization called African Union, which is simply there for cosmetic purposes, allow me to pass a very uncomfortable statement. The African Union is a toothless dog. Right now, there's war in Congo, there's war in Angola, South Sudan is in war, many other pockets of Africa at war. When they are busy putting on some funny little bow ties, tight jackets that can't even fit on their stomachs, queuing around the United Nations and in Europe, taking pictures with traitors. We don't respect that. Totally it's out of line. And for that reason, we can understand that saying one thing sounds very exciting. But the day the African leader will speak like Donald Trump and say America comes first, I wish the African leader can also assume the same language and say Africa comes first.
Yeah. I don't want to delve into, the Trump issue, but I know from a point of resilience, you have been pretty clear about how clear he is as a leader in terms of what comes first for his countrymen. And that perhaps to some extent has helped him. You flip the coin, we're also frustrated with him because, we're all not sure if perhaps he is the correct person to even be handling race relations, maybe right now in his country. That's happening. So it's a bit of a challenge. But I want to perhaps just shift a bit and talk about women in Africa, not just starting now, but really over decades and millennials, really. Often women are left out of the story. And I know that people have said to us, but nobody's leaving you out. Take your place. Nobody has closed the door on you. But we do know the facts are that often women will labor and really push behind the scenes. Typical example of Mama Winnie and how much of a force she was behind Madiba. Sankara's wife, I forget her name, one of my favorite women. These are real forces, actual real forces behind men we are so crazy about as a continent. But often when it comes to being able to profile their story uniquely, we suppress them. What can we do? Why do we do that? Why do we push women aside when it comes to Africa's narrative?
Sooner or later, you need to just allow me to burst out and tell you the culprit. I know it's uncomfortable, but it is true. I have said it once, I'll say it again. If God is a man, why are we afraid of giving him a woman? Question number 2. If we make the whole heaven a masculine heaven, where God is a male, Jesus is a male, the Holy Spirit is male, the angels are males, then women become an afterthought in the loneliness of men. That's where they fit into place. And then we come around and shout at the African that the African state is actually patriarchal. And you are wrong when you say that. The African monarchical system has never been patriarchal. You are well read, Jabu. We have had kings who are women in Africa. We have had queens who have led battles in Africa. Go to Mjaji, go to the Venda kingdoms. Without Makadzi, who is actually the chief pillar of the whole monarch, you cannot even install a king. The positions and the struggle and the tug of war between African males and African females is a phenomenon that we have had to deal with in the armpit of religion and colonialism. It is them who came with Abraham and his wife Sarah, and the story of Eve, who spoke to the snake and etc. Already through religion, you already learn from the very onset how women are marginalized and how women come out in the biblical text and in the religious space. Even up to now, your own church is still struggling with women ordination, for example. In 2020, the church was started by a woman, Ellen G. White. She gave us all the prophecies that you can imagine of. A few years later, the same church is arguing whether to ordain women or not ordain women. The same Jesus you preach was carried by a woman. And here you are arguing about the use of women. Are you saying women are only good for giving birth to children and nothing more? So you find that religion, together with colonialism and marginalization in terms of employment, access to resources, access to properties and etc., again, which is a colonial system, because under the traditional environment, when a husband dies, the wife remains with the estate of the husband, though in custody of the family, but you cannot tamper with her cattle and her land that her husband left for her. So colonialism and religion, particularly Christianity and Islam, has come in as bullies to the African women. I don't want to take that narrative as a correct narrative, that Africans have a problem with their wives. Let's agree, educated, colonized Christian Africans have a problem with women, because the narrative that now run with is that women are like Eve, women are like Rahab. Listen to all the sermons that are being preached. Every time a woman is mentioned, she's a prostitute, she's a harlot, she's talking to the snake, and she is a distraction to the greater agenda of God. When you have such a religion, how can you begin to talk to the political system when 60% of the people running the political systems are actually Christians running on this faulty software of the inferiority of women? When I say, therefore, let's allow the Godhead to have a woman, they say Maponga is backslidden. Maponga is now teaching the doctrines of demons. But how did God go into the womb of the earth and pick up a man? Why can't we agree that the earth is our first mother before the mothers who are standing on the two legs?
Yeah. And that's exactly why I want to ask you, why is it that we have more churches in Africa than factories that are being run and led by Africans? What is the fuss about religion then? Is religion even important? Because it seems to be confusing a lot of things, because like I had said, women, when the minute you say religion, you even leave them out more. They're not just left out of the African story. You get to religion, you confuse issues even more, because most of them don't even relate to the Bible, because it will put them as substandard, second, and so forth. Topic for another day. But so what is this fuss about religion in Africa?
Politics and religion are entertainment for the poor. Politics and religion are entertainment for the poor. Let me address this at a very painful level, because the African people have lost everything. Their only hope they have is the hope that is in the clouds, which is Jesus. That's the only place they can walk to and they accept it. You walk to the bank, you don't have surety. You walk up to university, you failed. You walk up to for a car loan, you don't have enough deposit. You walk up to your wife, you don't have enough money to pay lobola. You walk up to the shop, you can't afford what you want to buy. An African's door smacks on him every day. The only place where they are told, just as you are, come and God will accept you, has remained religion. And a little bit of hope once in a while when you are putting on a t-shirt donated by a political party. Do you feel like you belong to something worthwhile? But honestly speaking, religion, I have to agree with Karl Marx on this one, though it is like a bitter pill to swallow, that religion has become the opium of the people.
Okay, sorry, I thought I missed you there. Josh, what inspires your sense of Africanness as a person?
The blood that runs in me, I find it from my roots. My roots drank to make the tree, which are my parents. I am but a fruit. The day I learned that you can never harvest fruits until you water the roots. I began to feel the scars and the pains of my forefathers and what they had endured. And understanding the past gave me a clear indication of where I am and the future in which we are going. The system will not change until we actively participate, putting aside all the religion and limitations that we have. Those that are thinking in the box are still managed by the box. Those that are thinking outside of the box still use the box as a reference. But my age now, I've reached the level where ban the damn box and think.
Are you a Christian?
The platform I was given to have a conversation today, I will not admit that I'm a Christian. I would admit that I'm a bridge between a collage of belief systems of spirituality, that the cage which colonialism has locked Christianity into, the quarantine space which traditional faiths have been locked away from, the international principles which are from other religions. As a spiritual practitioner, you can call me that. As a spiritual practitioner, I have come to understand a whole barrage of belief systems and how each one of them seeks to take captives and lock them away from each other. And as Africans, we have been able to be divided. And in the midst of our divisions, we have been managed by the colonial system.
There are points you make that I particularly like about how, we've always known God as African people. Even before the Bible was brought to us, we would know how to relate with the sun. We would know when it's sunset and when it's dawn. We would heal ourselves, when with medicine. We pretty much had a life. And that life had a system, and that it was really just okay. But so as people who've always known there's a God, believed there's a God, but what would you say God represents to you as an African man?
There's some, maybe let me work with you, because I know I'm dealing with you young people, so that they can also understand me. Let me not dump too much content on their minds. It might corrupt their software. The same Bible that you believe in will then tell you that I and my Father are one. I am in him. He is in me. Me and him are one. God in us, the hope of glory. The concept of God, therefore, can only be found on the African continent in our own etymological explanations. The word Jesus and the word Satan are totally foreign to the African people. But the word and the name of the Creator is available in every African culture, custom, and language. What does that mean, therefore? Is that what we have named, we have had an experience with. And therefore, for me, the level of belief systems must be understood that we cannot worship a God who is imported to us and must be managed on a picture and be managed by a set of dogma. True godliness for me is what I wrote a paper some months ago entitled The 7 IR. I challenge you to go and read it. We are right now arguing on the 4 IR, Fourth Industrial Revolution. On that paper on the 7 IR, I recommend that there is a time when our forefathers lived. They manufactured nothing. They owned nothing, but they had everything. Man in harmony with nature is the highest form of spirituality, where you live in harmony with your environment, where the fighting chickens on your yard can communicate to you that visitors are coming. That is your Facebook. That is your Twitter. When you can read the clouds in the sky and you know that it will rain without watching it on TV, that is microclimatology. When you can watch the crocodiles nesting for the year, and at the level at which the crocodiles put their eggs, you can tell how much water this season is coming and how far will the Nile River flood. For me, that is geography at the highest form. To have a form of knowledge in terms of paperwork, but totally being disconnected to nature is foolishness of the highest order. That people are walking to the beach to swim when animals are running up the mountains to hide. And then you say human beings are educated. That is a bunch of fools. Our universities have become a photocopying room of educated fools.
What are your messages to young women, Black African women, Black African men, and African leaders? These are all Africans that you are speaking to today, and they will be listening to you even after this clip. What do you
Allow
want
me
to say?
Allow me to speak to you from the royal throne of the Sose tribe, where we have a name for God. We call him Musikavano. Musikavano, the one who forms human beings, and he stirs them on the pot and he makes them. And women in my culture are called Musikana. And the word Musikana is directly linked to Musikavano. God is named Musikavano. He creates humanity. And our women are called Musikavana, Musikana. The God in my African tribe is actually the woman. For it is through the woman that the universe is able to duplicate itself in the human species. Let every woman assume her role as a queen and as a princess. And if you assume that role correctly, when a woman, this is a beautiful one, when a woman kneels down, the man must sit down. Look at this illustration. You say it nicely, then it will sound very yummy. When a man is standing and a woman comes and she kneels down without saying a word, holding a dish of water, she has commanded the man to sit down. When a woman lies down, I cannot go there for the purposes of younger viewers. But when a woman stands up, the woman is telling the man, stand up higher. When a woman gets on the chair, the man is on the roof. Who is more powerful? The woman who talks a lot and gets little done, and the woman who says very little and gets everything done. I want every woman who is going to listen to this piece of advice to consider in their minds, do they want power of words or they want power of action? There is a woman who looks at her husband with one eye, and the husband gets 150 things done. And there's a woman who talks until the chickens come home, and she cannot get one screw put on the door. Find your positions of power and influence the destinies of the African nation.
And to the women leaders, African leaders.
The women African leaders, we don't want other males in the African boardrooms. We don't want a bunch of women who are educated and they come to the boardrooms putting on some tight trousers and some tight jackets and some nice shirts and ties to show the macho side that now they're playing with the boys. Then they write on their profiles, I was the first woman CEO, I was the first woman director. But when she is in positions of leadership, she is not there to advance the cause of the African woman. She is there to advance the cause of the African and the European males. You find these same women, when they are in power, they are putting their foot on top of fellow women, giving them maternity leave for only 3 weeks and 3 months, as if they are not mothers themselves. Sweden right now and Norway, they've approved policies now where their women can go on maternity leave for 1 year. Those are the kind of women we're looking for, who will be passionate about family, who will be passionate about children, who will be vocal about women's challenges on a European colonial male chauvinistic platform. Unfortunately, again, the education system has told our women, when you make it into positions of power, you need a bit of testosterone. You need to have a bit of masculine power. Then our women come with their short hair, come there knocking their heels on the ground, trying also to look masculine. We already have enough testosterone in the boardroom of men. What are we looking for? As men, we are not looking for other men. We are looking for women who are sensitive to each other. Can I say this in a painful way? Some of the most cruel women you will find, they are women who are cruel to other women, especially when they are in positions of power. And for that reason, I may want to recommend that when you ascend in power, remember not to get intoxicated with the levels of power and you abuse fellow women, because now you are in the league of thinking like a man.
Yeah. Okay, I can hear you. You can go ahead. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. That's fine. Anyway, let's wrap it up. We've got literally just a minute or so, and I want you to talk to millennials directly on this platform who are, you know, when we talk about women and leadership, I think there's so much work that still needs to just take place in that regard. First of all, about honest conversations that women alone must have without men, just by themselves, and how perhaps we react to each other, even when we're in positions of power. And again, to that conversation, we perhaps need to include African men who will vouch for these strong women to emerge. And when they do, they're the first to somewhat oppress them. So we also need to look at that coin where African men somehow don't really know how to handle these so-called strong women that they so admire. But topic for another day. Please speak to our millennials. What message do you have for them and what vision do you have for them?
Millennials, I'm excited to hear that the millennials read. And I would not have enough time to empty my heart to you. All I can recommend all millennials, get in touch with Jabulile Buthelezi, keep close to her. She has a book that she edited entitled Women in the Kitchen. I have not even launched that book yet. It's available. It will be a disfavor for me to think that through one sentence and through one interview, I can actually go through some of the critical points that are involved in terms of developing a holistic look at the feminine gender. And for that reason, I want to challenge you, please keep in touch, get yourself a good book. And if you can set up for yourself a study group or a reading club, I'll be more than willing to come and assist in whatever way possible. And we continue the conversations. I'm aware many of you might have lost your mothers, your grandmothers, and your aunties who could have come to you to counsel you and prepare you for this millennium. But you are not leaders of the future. You are leaders of the present. Prepare yourself. The war is not only physical. Let us use their system mentally and create for ourselves a future that we deserve.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Maponga Jay. Thank you for the time you've given us. We can never address Africa's problems in 1 hour. We can never. There are so many, but what's important is the beginning of planting those seeds. And where the conversation ends, it is an obligation of another African to pick up from there and move forward and stretch the narrative and stretch the dialogue. It doesn't belong to one particular corner. So thank you so much. I know they follow you, so they'll continue to follow you. We thank you and appreciate you for your time today until we catch up again in another session soon, hopefully.
Tag me on my Facebook. Tag me on my Facebook and my other social networks. Then we can share the conversation on other platforms.
I will. Absolutely. No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you.